Yeah.
Okay.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Stacks FS, where we talk about Formula One strategy, the engineering challenges, and what's going out on track. We've got a massive year this year because we have a whole raft of engineering, new car, power units, everything's changing. It's huge. Now, I'm Fred, this is Drea, and we're going to be talking through today what's changing in the 2026 cars. So if you're watching this year and thinking, I don't understand what's changing, let us talk you through it in this episode. Now, Drea, what are you excited about for 2026 and all these new cars?
Well, I mean, hi, I'm Dre, and basically I'm here to ask the questions that maybe we're all sitting at home and going, I don't really get that. What's this all about? So what am I excited about? I feel like there's a ton of changes. Like anything that I'm hearing in the news or, from the teams themselves, there's a lot that they have to kind of get their head around. And I think as viewers, probably there's going to be a lot that we have to get our head around. Like, is that allowed? Is that not? Why are they up in arms about this? That'd be about right.
Absolutely.
So I want you to kick us off. I think there's multiple.
Yeah, we're going to go through about 7 or 8 different areas today. So it's going to be probably a little bit longer than some of our Stacks FS podcasts, but stick with it because it's really interesting stuff. And when you're looking at this from an engineering point of view, and for those who don't know, I'm a chartered engineer, so my background's in aerospace, Formula One, rail, hydrogen fuel cells. I've got a wide range of experience in leading all kinds of technically complex advanced engineering companies. So for me, this is always very exciting because this is where we're changing the core concept of the sport. And then we see how all the teams and the drivers and everybody else reacts to it.
Okay. Well, kick us off then. What's one of the first things?
Okay. So the biggest shift I'm going to talk about to begin with is the power unit and the architecture. So this is the thing that powers the car, or the engine, for want of a better phrase. And it's changed totally from last year. The core concept is it's still a 1.6 litre V6 turbo engine, but the energy balance is massively different. So if you think of last year's cars and this year's cars, there's still around about 1,000 horsepower, give or take. There's a bit of difference in between. The difference is last year's combustion engine, 1.6 litre turbo engine, was producing about 850 horsepower. This year it's down to about 540. So a big reduction in the horsepower that it can produce. Now, in order to bring it back up to 1,000 horsepower, the MGU-K, which is the kinetic energy recovery electrical system battery that recharges from regenerative braking and what have you. Last year, it was only providing about 160 horsepower. This year, it's going to be providing around about 470, so not far off half the car's power, which is a huge difference in the way the car's running. Last year, you could rely on fuel mostly with a boost from electrical. This year, you've got to rely on the petrol engine and the electrical engine to be running full power.
So same but different.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
The other big change is last year they had something called the MGU H, which was a way of recovering exhaust gases and recirculating that to generate electricity, to feed back into the electrical control systems, to reduce turbo lag, to power things like the electrical systems, and you could also recharge the battery off it. And now the MGU H was a fantastic piece of kit, but also highly complex, expensive. And I think one of the reg changes was to try and make it easier for new manufacturers to come in. And that would be an area that would require a lot of development. And the other argument is that the MGU-H is not something that's particularly relevant to, say, road cars of the future. And you want Formula One to be developing the way that other people should follow, and that the MGU-H is seen as less. So whilst the MGU-H wasn't directly putting power to the wheels, they've lost a regenerative part of the thing. So now you're reliant on braking more than last year.
Interesting. Racing cars that are reliant more on braking
to generate their power.
Yeah.
So this means that the power unit now, much more than last year, the deployment of the electrical charge and into the motors to power the car is much more strategic than it was last year. Efficiency has become a really key thing. Hopefully it's not going to lead to people just pottering around following each other trying to harvest energy. We don't know at this point.
Are there any specific teams that you think are more strategic than others that have probably got a better handle on this?
Well, obviously we're going to come into the results into the next podcast, but I think some teams are looking strong right now with Mercedes and Ferrari so far.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
See, strategy I really wouldn't put as top for Ferrari.
No, we're not talking in race strategy, but, in terms of how they're going to use it. It's very open at this point as well.
Okay.
So next big change is fuel.
Yeah.
So, you change the power unit. We're now changing the fuels. And this year, the regs are that it has to be 100% sustainable fuel.
Right. Tell me a bit more about that then. How do they do that?
Yeah. So, what is sustainable fuel? Well, in theory, this gets into the carbon discussion where petrol source from oil taken out of the ground is taking carbon that's been captured out of the atmosphere millions of years ago and has been taken into the ground and is now oil. So when you take oil out of the ground and you release it by burning it, you're adding carbon from millions of years ago back into our current day environment. So sustainable fuel is where you're capturing carbon from today's environment and you're burning it again and releasing it back into today's environment. So in theory, there's a kind of closed carbon loop consideration there that people consider that's not as bad to do that, to capture carbon and reburn it, than to take it out of the ground and add it to. You can do that through a couple of methods. One is biological sources, so biofuels, or you grow crops and you turn them into fuels and things like that. And the other one is you capture it from the environment. Maybe you use wind power, maybe we use solar power, maybe you take things out of industrial processes, maybe things are already being made anyway. So if you take it, it's a waste byproduct of that and you put it back in and you can turn it into a fuel. And we've got some big fuel suppliers in there. You've got ExxonMobil with Red Bull, Shell with Ferrari, Petronas obviously with Mercedes, and Aramco with Honda and Aston Martin. These companies are investing massively in synthetic fuels, and sustainable fuels are really where some people feel the future of the combustion engine lies. Not just that everything will be an electric vehicle in the future, that maybe there's a future for the internal combustion engine, probably in a hybrid format, a little bit like what we're running in Formula One. And that will be really affected by these fuels, the justification to carry on using them if we can go to a scale on sustainable fuels, which is obviously different.
Okay, great.
So what do you think to that so far, though?
Well, I'd like to know your opinion on the fuel piece. You're talking about like EV and hybrid. What's your opinion on that?
Well, my dealing with biofuels goes around to about 2008 when I was in the hydrogen industry, hydrogen fuel cell industry, and biofuels were being seen very much at the time as a huge potential future. Now, there's two sides to sustainable fuels, as I've said. There's biofuel and there's an e-fuel, a synthetic fuel. The danger is if everyone became reliant on biofuel, we'd have to grow it from crops. To grow it from crops means huge amounts of farming being converted to fuel growing, which may be done at the expense of food growing, which may put the price of food up because fuel versus food, or maybe it leads to more deforestation and other things that would impact the environment by having it grown from a crop. So it's not just as straightforward as let's have a biofuel. Now, in Formula One, they're leaning towards more the carbon capture rather than the biofuel, I believe, with more these synthetic fuels, as they're called. So let's see where that journey takes us. But I am, as a car enthusiast and as a V8 enthusiast, as anything, I'm like, the more we can do to take what is a piece of mechanical marvel, the internal combustion engine, and give it a longer life, I'm pro. If that means hybrid engines where electrical and internal combustion technology work together, I think that's great as a way forward, personally.
Love it. Okay. Next, let's move on. Number 3.
So number 3, so still on the power unit, really, in a way, is the compression ratio saga. As you've probably seen in the news, people saying that Mercedes particularly have figured out how to have a different compression ratio than what is allowed at a higher temperature versus where the temperature is that the engine's being measured at. So the current regs, as stated, would be the compression ratio will be measured when the engine's cold. Right? Or low temperature. And other teams then suspected and believe through rumours that Mercedes have figured out how to change the compression ratio when the engine's warm, and expanding that compression ratio would enable them to create more power out of the engine than compared to everybody else who, if they're not using the same tactics.
Isn't that the whole kind of like part of racing, though, is being given some regulations, being given some rules to work to, and then you making the best and optimizing the best out of those regulations?
Do you know what? Absolutely. And you see me sort of raising my hands at the sky and like being creative with a set of rules and finding loopholes that no one else has spotted and giving yourself thus an advantage is the point of the sport.
Yeah.
It's always been the point of Formula One. And so before they've even been allowed to deploy said advantage, that the other teams found out about it somehow, figured it out, and then complain, we didn't figure that out. And on that basis, we feel it's unfair that they should be allowed to use that advantage. Really crap.
They're already changing the rules.
They're already changing the rules. Not straight away.
Yeah.
Because I would say they're even changing them in season is pretty unreasonable, but they're going to change it from the 1st of June. And what they're going to change in the 1st of June is that they're going to measure it both at cold and at warm, or say hot, which is about 130 degrees C. and they're going to measure it at both to confirm the compression ratio. No one has said or stated exactly what this is, and Mercedes haven't admitted that there is something. So this is all speculation, but the speculation is that it's probably using thermal expansion effects. So this is mechanical. This is materials changing size when they're heated up versus size when they're colder. And that is the main theory. There's other theories that it could be, but that's the main one. So somehow the chamber in the car or the components allow for a slightly bigger chamber, slightly more power at a warmer temperature. But, great to see the marvel of people of what they've done. Whether or not it affects their reliability long term or anything, we don't know, because I don't know exactly what components they've changed to do that at this point. And of course, Mercedes haven't not admitted to anything. They're now saying it won't make any difference, but they look pretty peed off. And I can also sympathise with being peed off when you've designed something to a set of regulations, you've met all the regs all the way through, and then before you even get to use it, they're saying, "Oh, we're going to change the rules because you might have figured it out better than anyone else." It's pretty crap,
It's
isn't
really
it?
rubbish. It's really rubbish.
Yeah.
Where does it end with that?
You know what? It's ridiculous, really. It's like with going back to when Jenson Button and Braun won the 2009 World Championship.
Came out of nowhere, didn't
Yeah,
they?
and they figured out how to maximise the diffuser. And that gave them a significant advantage in season, and everybody else was complaining it's not legal, and it's like, well, technically it is. They found a loophole. Why didn't anyone else spot that? This is what the sport is about. And I do think it's concerning when you just quickly change rules because everyone backs up and bullies, but because everyone calls a vote, if everyone votes against you, you're sort of a lone person.
You're screwed, aren't you?
Don't forget, Mercedes is now representing even more teams this year because they've also taken on Alpine as a customer, although they have lost actually Aston Martin as a customer. So
Okay.
Aston Martin's moved to Honda,
Yes.
which we'll come on to it in another podcast. But you've got Alpine winning Mercedes, you've got Mercedes, you've got Williams, and you've got McLaren. So they've got 4 teams using that Mercedes power plant.
Okay. It's like, who can use it better?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then from 2027, they're going to only measure the compression ratio at hot. So not at both hot and cold.
Okay.
So that was the way they're going to clarify it. Now we come on to the electrical energy strategy. So, you've not got the MGU H anymore giving you extra electrical charge coming through from exhaust gases. So you're not capturing that wasted energy because when it's hot exhaust coming out, it's wasted energy. It's energy just going off into the atmosphere, right? So now So now you're reliant on energy harvesting becoming really critical. Your braking, how you brake to maximize the charge is going to be quite key. And if you've got a hybrid car, you'll know this. If you slam the brakes on really hard, it's going to do some regenerative, but it has to go to mechanical. The brakes have to kick in as well. Whereas if you slow down more easily, a bit more gently, the hybrid system can regenerate more of that into battery. So whether or not then braking becomes less aggressive, I don't know, we'll have to see. And certainly when you're trying to rebuild your battery, you won't want to be braking really aggressively because you might have to move from regenerative into mechanical braking.
Right.
And biomechanical, that's the brake caliper clamping the disc. Next up,
DRS?
DRS.
I know that was one of the biggest things that was out there of the changes this year.
Absolutely. So what do you know so far?
I don't know very much. I just know that it's not, they've removed the DRS.
That's right. DRS is gone. No more DRS ever. Instead, we're going to be using electrical boost. Now, we'll explain the active aero piece in a minute because you might be thinking, well, I've seen this thing about active aero. Yeah, that's not DRS, so we'll come on to that. So now you're going to have something called like an overtake feature, which basically allows the car behind to deploy more electrical power for a short period of time than the car in front of it. So the car in front can also deploy electrical power to try and defend, and as going along their straight, and the car behind, if they're within the 1 second, at certain points on the track for certain periods, can deploy the boost that gives them a bit more electrical power.
But that sounds a bit like DRS. I know it's like technically different.
It's technically different because DRS was delivered through aerodynamics.
Right.
This has been delivered through electrical power.
Right, okay.
So one of the things that will really affect this, though, will be the whole harvesting strategy, which will be, can one person deploy it in a way that means the other person, although they might have access to that extra power, or if their battery is already depleted because they've been fighting over this for 2 or 3 laps. We don't know how that's going to play out at this point. I think that's going to be something to watch and find quite exciting as to how that really works. And will it work? Will it lead to the overtaking that we probably want it to do, or will it not quite work? We don't know that either at this point in time. So you can use it for boosting, you might be using it for defending and attacking, but yeah, I think if I look at that brings us then to the energy clipping piece.
I've heard this already said quite a few times, and I'm like, what is this
What is energy clipping? So energy clipping is that you can only deploy power for so much. Let's say you're on a particular part of the circuit, you can only deploy so much power during that part of the circuit. You've also got your battery level to monitor. So effectively, if it was a long straight, you might be able to power along it, but then the electrical power will reduce and you'll be left then running on this internal combustion engine that we've already discussed is now only 500 horsepower, not 1,000. So you're suddenly going from a 1,000 horsepower car to just over like a 550 horsepower car towards the end of a straight. So this is a much less powered car.
Yeah.
And so what we've already seen, which is really interesting, is whereas on, let's say, the Melbourne main straight, you're coming out the last corner and instead of going full beam straight away for a qualifying lap, you might have to go down the straight and then deploy full beams to try and accelerate up to the line so that you don't run out of electrical energy by the time you reach the end of that straight.
Yeah.
And we're seeing it. So the energy clipping is when you're basically like, oh no, I've used all my electrical power I'm allowed. My electrical power is now falling and I'm relying on the combustion engine only.
Yeah. As a driver, what would you be thinking right now? It's not just get in a car and drive really fast anymore, is it? You can't do that. There's all this stuff to think about. And I know that they had DRS before and then they had harvesting and they had all of that. But this seems already like so much change. I mean, the rookies, surely, in my opinion, wouldn't they actually find it a bit easier? Because when you're fresh and you're new and you kind of get in there and you learn things faster. Whereas maybe the legends are a bit more like, oh, it's can't teach an old dog new tricks very fast. What do you think?
That could well be the case. I wouldn't say that our legends in Formula One are so old that they can't be taught anything new.
No,
at this
I
stage.
mean, they're about my age. So,
Yeah. So that's the oldest one, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you've got so many things. I think it's going to suit people that are both very tactical, very strategic.
Yes.
Where you're thinking, and people that are a bit more in the moment and a bit less strategic might struggle a bit more in terms of the race management. They're all pretty clever people, but they will have to develop a lot. I think the one thing that they all find encouraging is they're all in the same boat.
Yes.
No one's in this saying, well, it's not fair, this team's got this new thing. Everyone's reset. So will it
may
be
the best man win.
Yeah, you'd expect the same. I'd expect the same people, the Maxes, the other people.
I've got to say, Max is going to have this surely because
he'll be able to use the system.
He's so focused, isn't he?
Yeah, and very strategic in how he uses it.
Yeah.
But the other people will do it pretty good as well. So it is. I think the younger ones have the benefit that they don't have the looking back to the old ICE periods. But I guess the others have to adapt, right? Next up, active aero.
Right. What's that?
Active aero. So that's the biggest probably change, arguably, to the chassis, that we can run 2 aero modes during the track. And the 2 aero modes are really, put it simply, there's the cornering mode, which is more like the traditional setup where the wings are all in their maximum position to generate as much downforce as possible, front and back. And instead of having the DRS, all cars have active aero on the straight. So as soon as you're on the straight, and at certain points, the aerodynamics open up.
Right.
So the rear wing opens up, the front wing changes in its positioning to allow the car to be as fast in a straight line as it can be, to let the car not be quite as heavy on the downforce and make it as efficient as you can. So every car gets it every lap. It's not a case of, are you within that distance, the car in front thing.
Right.
Every car gets active aero on every lap. We've seen some interesting in the testing phases from Ferrari where they had one where the thing flipped over. And we'll have to see what they do in the future and whether or not they choose to run that again. But the key thing is not only have you got these aerodynamics changing all the time around the circuit, but there is a risk that somebody gets penalised for getting it wrong. And it won't be the driver, it'll be the car and the systems, because the driver's not doing anything.
Okay, they're not in control of it.
No, it's just happening anyway. Okay. But there's a timing allowance for how quickly these things have to change. So you're reliant on the motors and things moving, the flaps and the software and the point on the circuit being measured at the right point. So if anyone gets any of that wrong, then you could, in theory, be then taking a penalty to say your component didn't change quick enough, there was a fault in it. If that's faulty, we're yet to see how that punishment gets dished out. Is to say someone's driving around, but the fact that their front wing's gone faulty might lead to 10 seconds. I don't know what it leads to at this point, so we'll have to watch.
I bet we will find out, and it'll literally be probably made up on the spot. I know F1, well, and depending who you are.
Basically 5 or 10 seconds, I don't know. And the other thing I think that's really worth noting here is then we've got the actual size of the cars has changed, the size and the weight.
Okay, what, they got smaller?
Yeah, which is a different direction because
Okay.
traditionally they just keep getting bigger and
They
bigger and
have,
bigger.
yeah.
You take an old F1 car and you put
Yeah.
it back next to last year's F1 car and it looked tiny. They just kept getting longer and longer and longer and then wider and wider. And, that's created a real problem on some of the street circuits, particularly where these cars are huge.
Mm.
Back in the day, F1, it was easy to overtake a
They
little
were
bit
like little
more.
go-karts, some of them, weren't
Well,
they?
in comparison
Yeah.
to the modern ones, absolutely. It's not massive, but it's enough. I'll run through the list quickly, but you're basically looking at roughly 30 kilograms lighter. And they've also changed the aerodynamics. So as much as we've moved to active aero, the overall car has around 15 to 30% less downforce. So we'll run through some of those. So you think maximum width, 2,000 millimeters reduced to 1900, so a little bit narrower, reduces drag, maybe allows for, a little bit closer racing from the cars. Wheelbase, so the length of the wheels is 3.6 meters to 3.4 meters, so a little shorter wheelbase. The maximum weight, 768 down to 740. So, you'd think that makes the cars a little bit more agile, a little bit more responsive. Floor width, slightly reduced. Front tyres and rear tyres, narrower, so again, less grip, less drag. So more efficient, but a little bit more, squiggly in the corners,
Agile.
maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think when you take all that together, you've got a smaller, lighter car, thinner wheels, you've got active aero, you've got new powertrains, you've got a whole bunch of changes that makes these cars just 100%, a million % different.
Smaller.
Next year.
Is having it smaller as well and smaller floor. I wonder if it affects some of the drivers who are a bit taller, who might be feeling a little bit more squeezed in
Yeah, I've
there.
not actually. I don't know that one actually. I imagine it probably wouldn't affect the
No.
chassis, but maybe in some ways we need to find someone to ask that question,
Yeah.
wouldn't it? Because you're getting into the monocoque design of the
Yeah.
F1 car at that point. But yeah, will George struggle a bit
I know,
more
I
than
was
others?
thinking
Yeah,
that.
he's probably one of the
He's
tallest
tall,
ones,
isn't
and they've not got Yuki Tsunoda in it this year, which
No.
I'm assuming he was one of the smallest
I
guys in
reckon
it.
so.
He's obviously out of Red Bull, which we'll do another discussion on that. But
Yeah.
I think so from a tech regs point of view, and these cars, these are so different. The way you're going to have to manage the electrical energy to manage the power unit and the reliability, we don't know. Are these F1 cars all going to finish the race? A discussion point in the next podcast in terms of where people are at. But you could see some real reliability issues this year. And that will come into later in the year when people will be taking massive penalties. When you change too many engines, you change too many parts, and everybody be going back to the back of the grid constantly by the end of the season because they've all had too many parts and engines.
And that'll be massively affecting things like the Constructors' Championship and the Drivers' Championship as well, won't it?
It will, won't it? So you could be looking at a thing where somebody looks like they're going to win, but they're losing out, and it could really shake up. So we're probably in for
quite a huge season, isn't it?
Massive, isn't it?
Yeah.
Massive season. So wow, so that covers through battery deployment, regeneration efficiency, cooling and challenges around those systems, optimizing the drag and the aero. And of course, with every aerodynamics change, everyone gets a big reset. Then everyone starts copying each other. And we're starting in March. By the time we're into between June and August, people will be coming on with major upgrades. There'll be minor upgrades in between, but major upgrades where they've been copying each other and trying to figure out how to adjust it, which means you'd hope to see people merging more as the year goes on, unless somebody unlocks some great feature.
Magic key.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's it.
That's it.
The changes.
Yeah, so,
good Lord.
Wow. If you've enjoyed that, share this with somebody else who can understand a little bit more about what's going to go on in Formula One in 2026. Thank you for joining us. Do subscribe, follow for more. We're going to be running talk all through the season, more around the drivers and how the Constructors' Championship's going, but we'll always be talking about these technical elements of the race and finding out more.
If you've got any questions as well, something that I've not asked, feel free to pop it below and I'll do my best to get my inside man to tell us all the things that we need to know about aerodynamics and engines and horsepower and tyres and the lot. That would be fantastic. It'd be really good to hear from you. Get involved.
Thank you so much. I'm Fred, this is Drea, and this is the Stacks FS F1 podcast.